the Ukrainians conducting raids, if you like, probing in different places, try and find where the Russians may have vulnerabilities, try and draw the Russian reserves from one position to another.
Welcome Major General Rupert Jones back to the programme, former retired Standing Joint Force Commander. Rupert, welcome.
John, good evening.
Can you give us, Rupert, then your assessment through the inevitable fog of war on what is going on the ground now? All the accounts tell us the fighting and the advances, it's getting pretty intense, and it's being measured in meters. There's something almost World War I about it.
Yeah, I mean, I think you're absolutely right to talk about the fog of war, John. You know, everybody's trying to peer through that fog to understand what is going on. And of course, war doesn't happen at the pace of the of the news headlines, if you like. And so people fixate on, they'll see an image online, they'll hear a report, and there'll be a kind of frenzy of analysis around that. The reality is that what we're seeing is very much the early stages of the offensive. I assess what you've got happening is the Ukrainians conducting raids, if you like, probing in different places, try and find where the Russians may have vulnerabilities, try and draw the Russian reserves from one position to another. They've done this in the past. And your reference to World War I is interesting, because actually in 1918, that's exactly what the British Army did. When it finally broke German lines, it probed, it pulled German reserves this way and that way, and then they broke through and there was a cascade. Yeah. Now, I'm not saying there's about to be a cascade, but these sort of offences, you get almost a phony phase, where, as you say, progress in yards, and then hopefully you'll get a big breakthrough.
In one sense, Rupert, it is a challenge for Ukraine to manage expectations, isn't it? Because most of us, including men and women of my generation, have been fortunate enough to have no direct experience of war. And our perception of war is framed by, I don't know, well, maybe partly by Netflix now, or by movies and drama and stories of war, so second and third hand or fictionalized, and also much more recently and more directly by the experience of what happened in Ukraine just months ago, when there were those remarkably successful advances by the Ukrainian military. They may have caused many people to imagine it was going to be in some way, if not clean, but certainly quick.
Yeah, I mean, I think you're so right. This thing, trying to explain the visceral nature of war, to those who've not been there, it is entirely impenetrable as a concept. So it gets kind of broken down to really simplistic concepts. Waging war is, I would suggest, the most complex, hardest endeavor man can undertake. And if you take as you mentioned Netflix, if you take as a reference point, something like Saving Private Ryan, that where they capture in a movie, one of the few movies that really captures the brutality of war.
Yeah.
The Ukrainians are trying to do the equivalent of that. They're trying to do the equivalent of breaking through the Normandy defenses. Yes. to get the fight going. It's incredibly challenging, and we should the other thing I would say is we should never lose sight of the human aspects. These Ukrainian soldiers who've trained on Salisbury Plain here in this country, they're back there, they're fighting for their lives, and it's incredibly tough what they're doing.
Yes, I mean, it is true, isn't it? This is a real layman's question, but it's true to say, isn't it, that defensive fighting is, for want of a better word, easier. The Russians are trying to do now what Ukraine did successfully at the start of the invasion.
I mean, yes, to some degree. You can have an academic conversation about, through history, the attack vice defense, but simplistically, at the start of an engagement, the defender, if you like, has the initiative. He's holding the terrain. If you could think of a kind of sporting metaphor for that, the defenders are, they've kind of got control. And so there is an element of that. And that's why in the military, we typically there's a rule that you attack, you need 3 times the force of the defender, because you've got to break through the defense. So you're right. And that simple layman's concept, it is harder being the attacker, at least early on. When you can break through and begin to move and gain terrain, then you've got the momentum. Then in a way, it's easier being the attacker. But at this stage, the pressure's on the Ukrainians, of course.
Now, just more broadly, headline today that tactical nuclear weapons are being deployed by Russia into Belarus. I mean, how significant is that? I mean, looking at it from here, it just seems that Russia, if it was minded to do so, could just as easily launch nuclear weapons into Ukraine from Russian territory. And if they were minded to go further, and there's a Russian voice saying, look, let's attack the rest of Europe, they could do that by sea. They could do that from elsewhere in Russia too. Is the Belarus deployment really important?
Well, I mean, I think you're absolutely right. In terms of what Russia's ability to use a nuclear weapon, it doesn't make frankly, the blindest bit of difference where it is based. That said, I mean, it is quite significant because it'll be the first time that Russia's deployed nuclear weapons of any type beyond its soil since the end of the Cold War. 1996 was the last time when their final weapons were withdrawn. So it is significant from that point of view. It's not new news. This has been on the cards for a considerable period of time. There was a statement about it back in March, but it's happening right now. It is significant in historical terms. I suppose it's also, what it really does is it brings President Lukashenko, Belarus, even deeper into Moscow's orbit. That's its real significance, rather than, as you say, any kind of tactical game-changing difference.
All right. Major General Rupert Jones, thank you, as ever, for leading us through the briefing room today.
Well, I'm John Pienaar, and if you found that interesting, we are here each day, Monday to Thursday, 5 o'clock till 7 o'clock on Drive, and from 7 till 8, Pienaar and Friends, where we discuss the big stories of the day each day on Times Radio.